Hey, John.
Hi, Mickey.
So, I haven't seen you since New Hampshire, that grim day.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. That day when I completely flubbed my prediction that Obama would win New Hampshire. Fortunately, I had a lot of company, but it wasn't one of my finer moments.
I flubbed it too, but you were sitting next to me while the results were coming in, and I was holding out hope that Obama would come back, and you said, no, whatever happens, Hillary's won it today. So you were the voice of reason.
Oh, that I said that she's won New Hampshire, or that she's won the whole thing?
Won New Hampshire.
Yes, yeah, because I pretty much have thought, since late 2006 that Obama was going to beat her for the nomination. That's why I did that cover at the end of 2006 on the two of them. So I'm a little defensive about it because I got New Hampshire wrong, but the overall arc of the thing, I'm defensive about my prognosticating abilities. So
you should be. You called on Hillary to drop out before Ohio and Texas.
Yeah, I did. Not that I haven't heard from a huge number of people about that, but I used the Slate delegate calculator, and I was terrible at math in school, but there was this wonderful logarithm that somebody put together, and I put the numbers in with Hillary winning every remaining contest 60-40, and she still lost. And so I thought if she had been smart, she would have dropped out the way Edwards did when he didn't see a path to the nomination, that she should have dropped out after Wisconsin and been the heroine of the Democratic Party. She had another opportunity last night. Can you imagine how electrifying it would have been if she had gone out on the stage and thrown her support to Barack Obama last night? She would have, her stock would have soared. She would have been majority leader by next week.
I thought people in the Senate don't like her enough to make her majority leader. Isn't that the conventional wisdom?
Yeah, but I think it is, and it's interesting that more senators have endorsed Obama now than have endorsed her, but I don't think they much like Harry Reid either, and I think if it was, a kind of a deal where she got out, they'd give her that as a consolation prize in a heartbeat.
Yeah. Well, but clearly she was right to stay in before Ohio and Texas. I mean, there hasn't been all that much damage done to Obama. He's actually stronger because he has, distanced himself from Reverend Wright now and suffered the worst she could throw at him and survived.
Yes, it's been
so you were wrong. You admit
No, I wasn't wrong. It's been better for Obama because it's toughened him up. It's shown, as I wrote on Newsweek.com this morning, that he can take a punch, which was a big question about him because, it looked like he had a glass jaw. And so he's now shown that he could take a punch because just a week ago he looked to be in deep trouble. So it's been very good for him. It's good that this Reverend Wright business came out in April instead of in October. I think it's been very bad for her. And my argument after Wisconsin and the argument that she should get out was about her interests moving forward. And instead, what she's done is she's, in the last 6 weeks, she's just run a rather pathetic campaign, even though she won Ohio and Texas in terms of, what she's had to do, embracing this ridiculous gas tax holiday, kissing up to Richard Mellon Scaife, who had, said that she killed Vincent Foster, and she goes and kisses his ass. That was kind of pathetic. Trying to raise the William Ayers issue in the debate, all kinds of really pathetic things that don't help her place in history, and she wasn't going to win anyway. So I think I was right to say she should have gotten out after Wisconsin.
Well, a couple of points. First, after she's really bloated mainly on the expectations front. If after Pennsylvania you had said, okay, Obama's going to win North Carolina big, but Hillary's going to win Indiana next, you would say Hillary hadn't done so badly. The problem is she let the expectations get out of hand. So people like me thought she actually had a chance to win North Carolina.
But that's just because, that's true on the expectations with North Carolina. But, if you had said to me she's going to get blown out in North Carolina and will win Indiana narrowly. She actually didn't win because the Limbaugh votes made the difference. It's very clear from the exit polling that she really didn't. If you look at it in terms of intentionality, which I know is a phony standard, but she really didn't win Indiana. But let's say you had said that it was she would win Indiana narrowly and get clobbered in North Carolina, and you had said to me, that's not so bad, John. I would have said, yes, it is so bad, because she needed blowouts in both states, big double-digit 60-40 blowouts in both states to realistically get back into this thing in terms of delegates and in terms of superdelegate perceptions.
We're not talking about whether she can win. Obviously, she can't win. We're talking about whether she helped herself or hurt herself in terms of her long-term brand.
No. It doesn't help you. It doesn't help you to have won some late primaries. It didn't help Jerry Brown to win a string of late primaries against Jimmy Carter in 1976.
It didn't help Reagan. It didn't help Reagan against Gerald Ford.
Yeah, it didn't help Gary Hart to win a series of late primaries against Walter Mondale. What people remember is the impression that you conveyed. The impression that you conveyed, of yourself and what, how much of a phony you are, whether you will say anything to win, that kind of thing. And in that department, she hurt herself.
Well, first, of course, it helped Gary Hart to win the California primary. What hurt him was that he got caught in a scandal next time he ran.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. But that people generally don't remember the primary results so much as what you did and said. And if you looked at her performance last week on Stephanopoulos, where the woman who said that she wants to end a war on science announced that she now wants to launch a war on economics. That's not the kind of thing that helps you long term in terms of your reputation.
Well, nobody could have embarrassed themselves more than Al Gore wandering around with Ed Koch in the New York primary in '88.
That's
and
true.
He recovered quite nicely from that.
Yes, you can recover from these things. But this whole question of Hillary sort of raises one of the reasons why we're doing this. And I was just struck, Mickey, in the last week that you didn't jump in on the gas tax hoax at all, if I remember right. Correct me if I'm wrong. And to me, that was part of a pattern where you, in the name of, I don't know what, contrarianism or whatever, when it was, quite clear to people who've looked closely at this that it's time for the Clintons to get off stage, that Obama, even though he's not perfect, should be the Democratic nominee and might even make a decent president, that in the face of all that, you kind of swung Hillary's direction, and it reminded me a little bit of what you've done over the last 7 years, where, I don't know, I guess because you thought it was predictable or whatever, or somehow not sufficiently contrarian, you didn't dump it all on President Bush, even though he's, not at all I shouldn't say, but relatively infrequently on President Bush, even though he's been one of the worst presidents in our history. So I think it raises an issue about, I love your blog, I read it religiously, I consider you one of my good friends, but this raises an issue about whether you've put your contrarianism ahead of what should be your larger political vision about who's good for the country.
Well, John, first, the article I posted the day before the primary was a reference to Ellen Ladowski's piece about how Hillary is delusional and lives in a psychotic bubble. So
I saw that.
I think if I was tilting for Hillary, I would not have put that piece as the piece the day before the primary. I didn't jump on the gas tax because everybody else was jumping on the gas tax.
But that's what you always do. You say that you degrade, you diminish yourself and your own influence, which I think is considerable, by saying, well, everybody else is doing this. In the gas tax case, let's just focus on that as an example. Initially it was done by three people.
It's a ridiculous charge. You're condemning me for remaining silent when everybody else was saying. Why do I have to? My idea of the blog is people come to learn things that they might not see elsewhere. that's a perfectly valid thing. So if I just join the chorus and say the gas tax is a terrible idea, I also wasn't convinced the gas tax was a terrible idea until half an hour ago when I looked up that Economist letter and figured, it's not such a good idea.
But, obviously, you haven't been.
The gas tax is not an important issue. It's not an important issue in terms of whether Hillary will be a good president.
It's a hugely important issue for a couple of different reasons. It reveals that her campaign is entirely without any principles, that she will say literally anything in order to win some primaries and possibly get elected president. It's the worst policy idea. Mickey, it's the worst pander. It's the worst pander
policy idea.
It's the worst pander ever in modern politics, and that includes the pander to the Notch babies in Iowa in 1988 when all the Democrats went there. It's even worse than the ethanol pander, because if you actually look at the recent research on ethanol...
John, you've totally lost perspective.
No, it was a pathetic pander. Pathetic.
John, you're so in the tank for Obama.
Mickey, you just said that I was untanked. Mickey, I wrote a critical piece about Obama about 10 days ago, and you called me untanked. So
right. But now you're back in the tank.
No, I'm not. I'm calling a spade, which is that that. Should I walk you through why this is the worst policy idea that has been introduced not only this year but in recent memory by a Democrat? I mean, it's terrible.
John,
do you want to get into the substance of it?
No, you've completely lost perspective. You're saying it's the worst. Not only is it's not just a stupid little pander, it's the worst pander in history. You're totally so pro-Obama.
Mickey, go on the subject. What's a worse pander? What's a worse pander?
What's the worst pander?
What's a worse pander than that?
The entire agriculture subsidy program is a worse pander. The entire Social Security system with the double dipping that was instituted in the Nixon administration is a worse pander, much more consequential for the budget than an 18-cent a gallon gas tax for 3 or 4 months. This is Clinton's pander against Paul Sagas, which obviously they thought this was a replay of, was a worse pander.
No, it wasn't. It wasn't nearly as bad.
It was exactly parallel because it involved more money.
No, it wasn't. All that he said was that Songas's, reform proposals on Social Security, would threaten benefits. Okay, and he wasn't flying in the face of, flat out unanimity on economics, unanimity on foreign policy. That this just feeds oil money to people who financed 15 out of our 19 terrorists on 9/11, that it's flat out, wrong on the environment and global warming. It's wrong on like 5 or 6 different levels, not to mention that it's a lie because the money wouldn't go into people's pockets anyway. The oil companies would just raise prices. Those other issues that you're talking about, and I agree with you on entitlements. You and I have agreed on those for years.
Well, so
those are at least... Those are debatable.
The worst pander in history?
Because
I don't defend it, John.
The other
it's
ones,
the worst pander in history.
No, Mickey. The other ones are debatable panders. You can argue the merits of any of those other issues. They have much more big-ticket items. You can argue the merits of them and say, well, you might say it's a pander. I might say it's a pander. Other people could make a good argument that it wasn't a pander. Not every time you say something that's popular is that necessarily a pander. A true, pure pander that takes it up into the absolute worst category is when there are no merits, zero merits, can't find one person, one neutral person, even anybody who works for Hillary Clinton, any economist, who will say that it's a good idea. So there's no debate. Like when I looked at it last week, I tried to find some people who could argue the other side. They didn't exist. On Social Security, on ethanol, on... you and I would agree on pandering to the National Education Association. You can at least get an argument. There's some debate. On this, there's no debate, which is what takes it to a new level of pandering. And
John,
I just thought...
You've totally lost perspective. This is like in the New Hampshire debate when you said that Hillary had committed seppuku and poured oil on herself and set herself on fire just because she forcefully responded to Obama once. You were completely wrong. You were so distorted by your pro-Obama bias.
My judgment was distorted on that.
In this case, it's not the worst pander in history,
in this case,
it's a tiny little thing that's not right. I'm not defending it. I'm just saying you've lost perspective.
You are defending it. This is what you do. Rather than going to the merits, you want to try to find something that relates a little bit to the process.
I'm not defending the merits of the gas tax, John.
Because you can't. Because it's impossible to defend the merits.
You're so in the moment, you've lost perspective.
Well, I agree with you. I plead guilty in the New Hampshire debate. I think you raise a very good point, that at that point I was not able to assess, and in subsequent debates have not been able to assess the relative performances of Hillary and Obama. Although I wrote in Newsweek that Obama's last performance was humorless, low energy, and dodgy, I believe were the lines I used. But you're right that I thought he just got crushed by Hillary in that last debate. But I plead guilty that my ability to assess them is tarnished by my preference for Obama. I don't believe that's true when it comes to assessing substance, and you have yet to respond on the substance rather than just name-calling me for being in the tank. You haven't replied on the substance about the panda.
I'm not defending the gas tax. Okay. I don't defend the gas tax. I chose to bash Hillary on some other issue, which was the Ellen Ladowski,
a week later. That was a week
why
after.
Do I have to march in lockstep to your pro-Obama agenda?
That was a week after.
I wasn't focused on the gas tax holiday. I'm sorry.
Right. That
99 out of 100 other people were.
That was a week after.
It wasn't such a big. It wasn't so important that I weigh in.
Okay, here's why I raised it, because it goes to this. You said you're not obliged to be in, the tank with all your Washington Monthly friends. 98% of the people I would wager, you're not obliged to be with them because you're a contrarian. And that's fine. You're an independent. You're an independent thinker, and that's great. That's what I love about you, is that you're an independent thinker. My question for you, and the reason for this discussion, is whether your belief and your identity that you have established as an independent thinker sometimes trumps what is actually better for the country. And my evidence for that would be the last 7 years, when you have really routinely laid off President Bush. And if you want to do that, that's fine. But I think if you wanted to do that, that you should stop saying that you're, a liberal who has regrets about, some liberalism and want to point out, sadly, the errors in liberalism, but that you're not a conservative, and just say, yeah, I am a conservative, and I will continue to point out the errors in both liberalism and conservatism. I know you go after McCain on immigration, so I'm not suggesting that you don't bash conservatives sometimes, but that you should be more direct about what your actual politics are in the light of the last 7 years.
John, about Bush. One of us was for the Iraq War. It wasn't me. It was you.
That is correct.
So how am I the pro-Bush person when you're the one that supported Bush's worst
I wasn't
policy?
Supporting Bush. I was wrong on the war, like a lot of other people, and unlike some other people, I've admitted it. So where do you come up
attacking me for being too conservative? Because
I wrote 300 columns in the last 7 years, ripping Bush on many, many, many different subjects, and you have a few scattered items on a few minor issues, and have not really wanted to take him on as he shredded the Constitution and did other highly objectionable things. In other words, this idea of identifying where liberalism has gone wrong, which you and I, as veterans of the Washington Monthly, we were raised on, we were schooled in this. I've done it a lot over the years. I think it's a very worthy way to devote one's time as a journalist, but it was kind of superseded by history. And I think the same thing applies to Obama and Clinton. And so the idea of finding, where Clinton, you want to keep her in the race for whatever reason, or, lay off her, even when she often has done some really pretty appalling kinds of things, for reasons I don't get. And I think it's almost like a narcissism of small differences that clouds your otherwise superb analytical abilities and insight, which exceeds mine. routinely. I'm not trying to say that I can reach your level of insight into public policy. I'm talking about the frame that you have on our politics in 2008.
A couple of points. I was very late coming to the realization that George Bush was as bad a president as he seems to have been. Actually, it's only Jacob Weisberg's book that really convinced me of that, because I always assumed that maybe he must have some deeper rationale that it seemed on the surface he can't have been doing it for all the silly reasons that people on the left say he was invading Iraq, and then you bought, John. So I admit, I was guilty. It wasn't until immigration reform that I realized, hey, there's a pattern here. He has these big grandiose ideas that he pursues monomaniacally and stupidly. So I agree that the scales fell from my eyes late on that. But I deny, and I'm for Obama. I'm happy that he wrapped it up. I think he's stronger for it. I just think it was silly for Hillary to drop out. I wasn't for Hillary. Certainly in New Hampshire, John, you were sitting next to me. We were both very upset that Obama was losing in New Hampshire. So I sort of deny that our hearts are in sort of the same place. But I also deny that there's this sort of, there's no danger of reversion to old liberal mistakes. And with Obama, I don't think that's true. On Iraq, he pledged to get out irrespective of whether there would be a bloodbath if we left. I think that's not a trivial problem. It's a real potential disaster if he actually does what he said in that debate, which is ignore the advice of generals that all hell will break loose if we leave. Don't you think that's a problem?
Oh, I agree with you. And I think there are a lot of issues, about Obama's politics that deserve really close scrutiny. I would agree on that. I agree with you on Obama and affirmative action. I want to see him. I might be the only person who agrees with you and picked up on the importance of his comments as they're related to his own children not necessarily receiving preference. I want to see him flesh that out because it's important and it could be a very important step for this country for him to move to a more class-based approach to affirmative action rather than race-based. And there are a whole lot of other issues that we need to hold his feet to the fire on. But I was talking about a kind of an assumption on your part that, everybody else is doing something. And a lot of times they're not, because everybody else is just assessing the politics. And this gas tax thing would be a really good example, because at the beginning it was, the New York Times editorial page, and Krugman, like 2 days later, the same day I did, weighed in. There were not all of these, pundits and bloggers and everything who were all over it. I had to do, reporting to find out what was wrong with it. So I don't think that you're right that, everybody else is jumping on these things, right away, and there's not a place for you to jump on it right away just because it's obvious. That to me is your mistake. You think that if it's an obvious point, everybody else is going to make it, and you want to make the counterintuitive point, the contrarian point, but sometimes the obvious point is the right point, and your voice can contribute to that debate.
Well, all journalists want to make the counterintuitive point. That's Murray Sales' theory that there are only three stories in journalism. Arrow points to defective part, we name the guilty man, and everything you thought about this subject is wrong.
Right.
And so everybody's going for everything you thought about this subject is wrong. That's how you make progress. But, so yes, I don't think people come to my blog to hear what everybody else is saying.
They hadn't said it yet. If you had last Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, even Thursday, if you had written about it, and you could have gotten maybe the thing rolling sooner.
Against the gas tax holiday?
What?
Don't be silly.
Sorry, say that again.
You're criticizing me for not falling into lockstep with your pro-Obama
No, I wanted
agenda.
you to be I wanted you to be ahead of me. You would have saved me some work. I would have linked off your site.
Holiday, Johnny. I'll give you the gas tax holiday.
I wanted you to be ahead of me. Look, I write for Newsweek. It doesn't matter if I'm behind you. I rely on you and other great bloggers, and Josh Marshall and other people like that, to give me links, because you see all kinds of stuff. You're much better at being on top of this early, and it's not a problem for me because I write for the MSM, and I can come, or on television, I can come to it a little later. What I'm talking about is what you devote your talents to in terms of getting there early, and often it's to this narcissism of small differences rather than to the big picture of who's the bad guy and who's the good guy.
The gas tax is a small issue. Card check is a big issue. What troubles me that Obama and Hillary and everybody else, but I don't believe Hillary is sincere about this, and I'm worried about Obama, they want to institute this system where instead of 51% of workers voting for a union in a secret ballot, 51% of voters sign a card in the presence of union organizers, and then there's a union. Then the union is appointed the sole and exclusive bargaining agent for those workers, and basically becomes very hard to get rid of. I don't think that's a good thing. I think it's a major structural change in the way the economy is run that has vastly more implications than a 3-month gas tax holiday. Well, and Obama is for it, and that's exactly the sort of thing that I worry about.
I'm for it too.
Sorry?
I'm for it too, and I think that it reflects the sort of Rip Van Winkle problem that I've been trying to address, maybe not as clearly as I should. Look, you and I started out at the Washington Monthly writing basically anti-union pieces. I mean, I trashed PATCO, the Air Traffic Controllers Union, and other unions. I loathe the teachers' unions. It's about the thing I feel almost most strongly about in the whole area of education is what a menace the teachers' unions have been. But overall, workers are getting the shaft in this country, and we need to strengthen the labor movement, which has atrophied terribly. And I get the sense that you wouldn't have any problem if it atrophied even further and workers were even less well represented, and the SEIU represented fewer people. I want the SEIU to represent more people. Now, I don't want AFSCME to represent more people because I have some real problems with government unions. But there are a lot of other unions that represent janitors and poor people and people who are getting shafted in this country that you are not thinking about enough, in your reflexive anti-union, crypto-conservative views. This is the heart of conservatism you're talking about.
My solution is the heart of Clintonism. My solution for the problem of low wages, and that's a huge part of my book, is that unskilled workers are getting the shaft. My solution is tight labor markets, the Clinton solution, what happened in the 90s. The labor markets are so tight that if somebody shows up and works, you have to pay them a lot of money. That lifts all the boats at the lower end of the wage scale. That's what we should be trying to get back to the 90s.
We have to do both.
Unions,
we have to do both. We have to strengthen unions, too.
Unions introduce a sclerotic element in the economy that just makes us lose the global competitiveness race. So why are all the union auto plants, going broke, and the non-union companies that are, where they're making the cars in America are prospering? I don't think it's a coincidence. The first two things that a union does when it gets in, democratically, they vote to promote by seniority and have due process for hiring and firing. Those are both good. Those are both seemingly good things from the point of view of the workers. They're terrible things from the point of view of the performance of the company.
Look,
if you worked in a company that had due process for firing and promotion by seniority, you would be gone. That is not a productive company. You would not work in that company.
Yeah. Okay.
And you would not want to manage that company.
Mickey, we're sort of talking past each other here. I am not an orthodox pro-union man. I think there is merit to some of your arguments, but I do believe in the idea of unionism for many sectors. And on the auto industry, the problem is not that the UAW exists; it's that the auto companies got rolled by the UAW. It's like Hitler and Chamberlain at Munich. The problem with, and this is something that's very relevant to the people who criticize those who want us to talk to Ahmadinejad, talk to our enemies. The problem with Munich was not that Chamberlain went to Munich, it's that he gave away Czechoslovakia to Hitler at Munich. The problem with the auto industry is not that the UAW exists, it's that the UAW rolled the auto companies.
You're defending unions by analogizing them to Hitler? That's a new one.
I'm talking about the way negotiations should work, and I'm saying that
this is the standard
Mickey,
defense.
I'm saying that you really are in no position to call yourself a progressive if you don't believe in unions on some level. And it appears that you don't, that you'd be just as happy with the whole country being right to work and no unions. That's not consistent with calling yourself a progressive anymore. You have to say, all right, I am a conservative, I should just admit it.
I don't call myself a progressive.
I thought you did.
I don't call myself a progressive.
A neoliberal.
Why do I
don't
have
you
to
still
call myself a progressive?
Or a neoliberal? Don't you still call yourself that?
I don't call myself a progressive. I call myself a Democrat.
Not a neoliberal anymore. A Democrat.
Bill Clinton pioneered a form of democratic politics that did not rely so heavily on unions. In fact, his Secretary of Labor, Robert Wright, said the jury was out as to Secretary of Labor said the jury was out as to whether there's a place for Wagner Act unions in the 21st century economy. I'm with Robert Reich. I think unions serve their purpose, but now they're too complex and old-fashioned and adversarial to work in a fast-moving economy.
I don't disagree. I don't disagree with any of that. I think that unions have to modernize. If you talk to somebody like
progressive?
Because Andy Stern, first of all, Andy Stern's not wedded to the Wagner Act. If you talk to Andy Stern, who's the head of the largest union in the country, the Service Employees International Union, the SEIU, he is very, very open-minded on all of these issues moving forward about what the social contract should be and how unions are sclerotic. They need to modernize and do a lot of different things. Of course, he gets pulled by his own membership on some particular issues, but there is a debate, and that I welcome, on the future of unionism. But you don't seem to believe in unions, period, which is kind of a different discussion.
I don't believe in Wagner Act unions, which is what the card check triggers the Wagner Act, which empowers the union to be the sole and exclusive bargaining agent. That's the key to the way unionism works. If you want to say, oh, I'm not talking about unionism, I'm talking about schmunionism, some other form of unionism that is off in the future and in Andy Stern's imagination,
letting unions represent,
that's fine, but the card
letting
check triggers the
unions
Wagner
be the
Act.
sole bargaining agent is fine, but unions have to sense that health care and other things, instead of stupid work rules and sclerotic, structures, are the future. But that's a different issue from whether they can organize and expand and represent more workers, so that those workers don't get the check. I mean, you make it seem like workers are doing okay in America. They're not.
My solution is heat up the labor market and keep out low-wage immigrant competition, and you will see wages rise at the bottom. That's what happened in the 90s. It can happen again. That's my answer. I'm not saying that the low-wage workers have done well in the last 6 years, but they did well in the 90s, thanks to Clinton and the hot economy. That was not because they had unions. It was because we had a tight labor market.
Because we had a huge technology boom and all sorts of externalities that changed the economy.
That's what created the tight labor market. Yes, and it was built on a bubble, but it was a proof that the tight labor market strategy can work.
Yes, but we don't have that, and so in the meantime, there are a lot of people hurting. A gas tax holiday is not going to help them being able to negotiate for higher wages, so they're not paid, $8 an hour and try to support a family on that, is something that people who care about the original ends of liberalism, which you say that you do, need to think about. So just trying to raise the banner for the conservative anti-union agenda, it just seems kind of out of step with the particular moment of history that we're in, when unions are very weak.
Your argument for unions is they're a great thing. The problem is that they don't lose enough. That management gives into them. That seems like a perverse defense.
No. I don't. I want them to win more on wages. I even want the teachers union to win more on wages. What we need there is a grand bargain, more accountability for more pay, and the sooner that the unions understand that that's the future, and people like Joel Klein in New York City, are trying to make this a reality. That's when we're going to start to get our education system going.
people have been talking about that deal for 20, 30 years, and it never seems to happen. And the answer is that the institutional mechanism of unions and their very democracy means that they defend their current members, many of whom are the incompetent teachers you want to fire.
I totally agree with that. And you know that you and I are in complete agreement on that as far as the teachers' unions go. But where we're not in agreement is as far as the janitor goes, okay? So I think there's a big difference between a teacher and a janitor. I do believe with you that there are major elements of unionism, and the behavior of the teachers' unions has been really awful. They pretend to be on the side of the angels, and they're not. That it's inconsistent with saving our education system. So I'm all for getting unions out of education as much as possible, but I want them in those office buildings. I want them in those cafeterias. I want them in places where people are not making a living wage. And you never talk about it or write about it. And so I think thinking of yourself as
of unions.
What?
It's a mighty small sliver of unions you're defending, John. You're defending unions for janitors, but not for teachers.
No, it's a huge chunk of America, low wage workers. It's a huge chunk of the workforce, and I want that expanded. They're not well represented by unions. But all I'm saying, the only reason we're even... And they should be.
What will help them is a tight labor market and some control of the border, so they're not competing for lower wage.
I'm open. I'm not sure. I'm not sure on this checkoff thing. I'm not sure if I'm for it or not. I need to study it more. But I'm for exploring a wide variety of things to allow them to better organize for themselves and for other low wage workers. And I never hear you speak up on behalf of low wage workers. You've got a few hobby horses, immigration, unions, a few things which for the 25 years you and I have known each other, you've been focused on. And my argument with you is that at this point in our history, you just need to broaden the lens, look at other things, and assess whether these very particular issues that have been of great interest to you are really the central issues facing the country. And that's all I'm suggesting. I need to do that too. That should be part of my job. Am I focused on the right things? Often not. I've been writing too many pro-Obama columns lately. I need to do some other things, because I have to worry about getting too predictable too. And there are plenty of things wrong with Obama to criticize. All I'm saying is that we need to. You are so talented that for you to try to flog Hillary Clinton's campaigns to life so that she can drag this thing on, or go easy on George Bush because everybody else is beating up on him. It does a disservice to where we are right now as a country. But I say that with great respect.
Thank you for the lecture. In terms of helping low wage workers, it's much more important to get control of the immigration problem than to encourage unions, which will help a tiny fraction of those workers who are lucky enough to be in the unions. It's just an order of magnitude difference. But the institutional interests of the Democratic Party are the unions. So we get a lot of discussion about unions and card check. It's not as important as immigration for the low end of the labor market. I think I'm right about that. That's why I talk more about
a lot of the unions. A lot of the unions don't agree with you, and they're not morons when it comes to the workforce. Unions have shifted position on immigration. They used to be against it, and now unions like the SEIU are much more receptive to immigration reform because they want to put a lot of their workers on a path to citizenship and then organize them. And that makes perfect sense because they're being abused right now.
Well, I actually am interested in what Andy Stern's views are on immigration. I think I had some. He's the SEIU head. I think he's sort of waffling on it. His membership demands.
Yeah, he's caught between his membership and his. Yeah, you're right.
Yeah. Well, he should waffle more.
No.
Can I ask you about Obama? Why is heirs a bogus issue?
When at the look, I don't think anything's an issue that shouldn't be raised and discussed. The more discussion of all these things, the better. But when Hillary said, you were on the board of the Wood Foundation in Chicago with this William Ayers, who was a weatherman. The senior vice president of UBS Bank was on the board. Senior partners at Chicago law firms, professors from the University of Chicago. This is just so lame, for her. And the worst kind of guilt by association. And for them to engage in guilt by association, they associated with crooks. Her law partner, Webb Hubbell, was a crook. McDougal was a crook. That doesn't mean that the Clintons were crooks. So if it's not relevant for them, why do they want to do to Obama what was unfairly done to them in the 1990s? That's what they want. It's like the Scaife thing when she went and kissed Scaife's ass, and then she brought up Reverend Wright, with Scaife, basically saying to Scaife, I was talking to a group of 10-year-olds recently, and take your children to work day, and they came to Newsweek, and I said, imagine a playground, okay, and a bully, Richard Mellon Scaife, has been beating a little girl on the playground, beating her senseless, saying that she killed a man, killed Vincent Foster, all kinds of other horrible things. And then a little while later, a few years later, the girl on the playground goes up and taps the bully on the shoulder and says, Mr. Bully, Mr. Scaife, see that kid over there? Go kick the shit out of him. That is the definition of lame, pathetic, desperation politics. They want the press, Scaife, anybody to do to Obama what was unfairly done to them in the 1990s. Guilt by association, ridiculous, digging up stupid scandals, anything they can to destroy him and thereby destroy the Democratic Party, or potentially destroy it. It's the epitome, it's the definition of selfishness and narcissism, and you haven't touched on it in any fashion that I've seen this year. Maybe I've missed some entries.
I've talked about Scaife. The weird thing about Scaife is that at the height of when he was doing his, beating up on Hillary, he was dined at the White House, and they were very gracious to him because he contributed to the White House Historic Preservation Fund. So it's bizarre. It's a sound politician's instinct to suck up to your enemies and draw them in, and I sort of don't falter for trying to win over and co-opt her worst enemy. I think he's sort of changed his views.
This is what I mean. It's just pathetic. People should have some sense of pride. What you're doing, because you've got this frame, this contrarian frame, where everybody else in your world and our world, thinks that the Clintons should get off stage and move on, and we should just get on with Obama versus McCain, whatever. Your whole frame of mind is to look for the contrarian thing, even when the truth, which is that it's pathetic that she went to see Richard Mellon Scaife, should trump the contrarianism. You're so hung up in this idea that in the contrarianism that it's just distorting your judgment.
So not only do I have to be against Hillary, I have to be against Hillary for the specific reasons that you think I should be against Hillary.
No, you don't. You can be against her for other reasons.
I like the fact that Obama has won. I'm not troubled by Ayers. I haven't hit on Ayers. You're from Chicago, so you know more about Ayers. I wanted to hear what you had to say.
Yeah.
I do think the Reverend Wright thing is troubling, and here's why I think it's troubling.
I agree it's troubling.
And it's troubling because for his sermons were troubling for the very reason Obama says he was troubled, which is the victim mentality. Peggy Noonan wrote a column where she sort of implied that Obama's that Wright's bitterness was sort of somehow constructive for blacks, so they could sort of have this touchstone of bitterness, and they could go to the church on Sundays and be authentically black, and that wasn't bad. But I think by and large, the victim mentality is a pathological thing, as Obama seemed to recognize. And I want Obama to be a leader. I want Obama to get out of front of the victim issue and to sort of distance himself from Wright before he has to. And instead, he only did it at the very moment when he absolutely had to. And that's my major trouble with Obama, is that he's not a leader. He's sort of a punching bag and a wuss he's friendly with all sides, and he respects them, and they like him.
and you can get a lot done, as Charlie Peters wrote. In the legislature, you can get a lot done by understanding all sides and giving when you have to give. But a leader gives when he doesn't have to give. A leader gets out front, and I haven't seen Obama get out front.
I thought that he did on the now maligned race speech, which is being fairly criticized, for Obama comparing Wright to his grandmother. I think that's a legitimate criticism of it. But he did, in some ways, elevate the debate, and that's what you want a leader to do, a transformative leader. And he has been out front on some of these things. I don't know if you read, the column I wrote about being with him in Texas when he said to an African American audience, "You've got to put down the chicken wings and the cold Popeyes for breakfast. This community is being just decimated by juvenile diabetes, and it's a huge, huge problem." And when Warren Beatty did that in Bulworth, you got to put down the chicken wings, he was practically, run out of the room by angry African Americans. Obama can tell it to people, and they cheer. And Martin Luther King Day, this again is not something he was forced to do. He went to Ebenezer Baptist Church this year, and he said to the black community, "We have been too homophobic and too anti-Semitic. We have to stop doing that." So I think it's wrong to say that on some of these things he hasn't been out front. I wish he had left the church a while ago, but I think that people should be judged on what they do and say. And since I am from Chicago, I know that nobody has heard Obama say any, bad stuff, even vaguely approaching the kind of thing that Reverend Wright said in public or private conversations.
I'm not saying he agrees with Wright. I think it's clear to everybody, and that's why he won, that he doesn't agree with Wright. And when he says, but then he's never agreed with Wright. That's the problem. Why the race speech is an example for my point, because it was at the last possible answer when he absolutely had to say what he thought that was different from Wright, that he said it as unstrongly as he possibly could. He was terrified of alienating.
I don't think so.
Of alienating the black constituency.
Look, so any other politician
equation between Wright and his grandmother.
Yeah, any other politician, as a senator told me recently, would have thrown Wright under the bus much earlier. Clearly, Obama should have. You could tell from the Meet the Press interview that he wishes he had, and that was a mistake that he made. But it certainly isn't a disqualifying. It's not
as opposed to weakness.
It isn't a disqualifying mistake. No, the timing.
Why is it elevating to wait till the last possible answer? That's not elevation.
The speech was a quite almost brilliant effort to take an extremely taboo subject that is fraught and find common ground and lift it to a new level. It was overtaken by events. You could argue, as I think we agreed, that it's in some ways been overtaken by the poor timing of it. But look at it as a model for what he could do as president. I hope, I asked him on the plane a few days ago when they started talking about the gun issue. I said, "Will you give one of those speeches on guns?" And he said, "Maybe." I look forward to him doing that. But the idea of a president who has the capacity to do that, which the other candidates don't, to try to transport the country, take it to a new place on difficult subjects, it's a very exciting idea if he can execute it. And I think he might well be able to.
I agree it's an exciting idea, but the race speech was a bad sign. It had all these fake equivalences. It was the timing was awful here. He'd gotten in trouble, and now he's lecturing us. I so don't want to be lectured by this guy. Why? What gives? Why do I?
I don't think he was lecturing.
Defer to him. I mean, Jesus.
He wasn't lecturing. Well, presidents lead through the theater of the presidency. If you can't inspire and elevate and transport the country, you can't be a great president. They're mutually exclusive. You could conceivably be a good president, but you don't have the potential to be a great president unless you have this in your toolkit. And I think you were nice enough to interview me for this for Bloggerheads about my FDR book. I mean, that's what he could do, and so that part of Obama, that potential for Obama, I read what you wrote about the speech, and you sliced it up, with your pitiless logic, which is far superior to anything that I could muster. And you made a number of good points, but you missed the big picture when you assessed the speech, which is that it gave us some sense that this guy actually could transport the country on difficult issues and be a educator in chief. Now, you say you don't want to be lectured to, but every great president is an educator. Every one. They've all been educators.
I think there's a difference between the FDR that you described in your book and Obama. FDR, it was the pit of the Depression. Nobody knew what the hell to do. Everybody was in trouble, and you looked for a leader who would try things out and inspire. And FDR did that. And you pointed the origins of his polio clinic as being the prototype for that. I buy all that. This is a case where the public was way ahead of Obama. The public knew why Wright was wrong, and here he is lecturing them. Well, I don't want to be lectured by a guy whose thinking is behind me. I'm willing to be lectured by a guy when I don't know what the heck is going on and it's the middle of the Depression. That's the difference between FDR and Obama.
Well,
the people he should have been lecturing was the black community, and he didn't.
Well, as I said, he did lecture
the white community.
He did lecture the black community on several occasions, and you chose not to notice. But
that speech
because that would have required you to say something that was too predictable. That's the genesis of our argument, is your pathological fear of saying something that might be right and predictable at the same time. Now, this is a sensitive subject for me, and maybe this explains why this whole thing has come up, because I fear right now that I'm being too predictable. As a journalist, you don't want to be too predictable. And so people say, if you write another a column that dumps on Hillary and says something more favorable to Obama, I'm going to shoot you. And my feeling is, but that's what's going on. And that's the way, at least that's the way I see it, is that she is being lame and pathetic and wrong on the merits. And, he is, even if we stipulate this on the Wright speech, that he's run a much better, more uplifting, more hopeful, and better campaign. And just because that's the predictable thing doesn't mean it's the wrong thing. And that's where I think we're kind of talking past each other.
But the Wright speech, the race speech that we're talking about, the old one, not the new one, was bad. It didn't elevate the. Yeah. It was directed to this phony lecture to the white community.
We disagree on that. I thought that he did.
It failed. He didn't.
It certainly didn't fail at the time.
He Wright more completely, and you've cherry picked.
No, it didn't fail.
Cherry picked his speeches where he's talked about Popeye's chicken.
No, you were
about Popeye's chicken. The main problem with the black community is the lack of marriage and out of wedlock births.
And he's talked about that. He's talked about that on many occasions.
Which Bill Clinton did lecture about. Then I would give him more points. I give him points for Popeye's chicken. I just don't think Popeye's chicken is that important compared with what Clinton lectured about, which is a culture of poverty and non-marriage.
You're minimizing. First of all, Obama has talked about non-marriage, and you're minimizing the Popeye's chicken. What he's saying
What's
is
so terrible about Popeye's chicken?
What he's saying is,
in the morning,
I think that you don't
like the idea of having
you don't
Popeye's
get it that adult onset diabetes in children is something that is new in medical history, and it's now going at epidemic proportions in the United States. And this is something you're just not up on, Mickey, and it's a terrible, terrible problem. And it's worse in the African American community. And so the question was about health and getting health costs under control. And he went, as he should, to we need preventive health. And then he segued into, and he didn't have to, into some criticism of some habits in the African American community. You should be giving him points for that. As for the race speech, we just disagree. I think that when he said that the problem with Reverend Wright's generation is that they thought America hadn't changed at all and hadn't improved in terms of its race relations, that they had a static view of race that was trapping them in the anger of the past, that was a very acute point, and it helped him in moving to marginalize Wright, Sharpton, the whole rest of them, as one hopes that he will, should he be the nominee and president, and we can move into a new chapter in race relations in this country. The potential of that entirely eluded you as you cherry-picked that speech for minor inconsistencies or other things that you thought were illogical. You missed the forest for the trees. And that, again, is my
the
my theme
potential
here.
eluded everybody. The speech was a transparent failure. He lost the next few primaries, and he didn't start winning until he renounced Wright more forcefully.
That's causality is totally phony. There were many other things that happened in there, like Wright going on a rant. He actually benefited after the speech. He went up in the polls. It was downloaded more than 5 million times on YouTube. It basically signaled that although there were no real sound bites in the speech, that you could get a more complex message through to the American public, or at least to the elites. That the soundbite culture was waning because he could get something through that was more complicated. In that sense, it was a very happy, encouraging occasion. In the same way that his 1.5 million donors, which is dramatically reducing the power of fat cats in our process, is a very happy development. But because it's predictable to point that kind of thing out, you haven't been on these huge changes that are going on in our politics this year. So all I'm trying to do, this is about the perfectibility of kausfiles, which I read religiously, and just took Robert Wright's bait when he asked me to express some of the views that I did to him over lunch to you directly. So that's all that I'm doing.
John, you've been expressing this to me for 15 years.
This
is the same conversation we had at Newsweek. I mean,
okay.
My response back
Point
to you
taken.
Until you wrote that thing about the bitter and clean comments, you were totally in the tank for Obama.
I didn't. I mean, because he had run an excellent campaign, and for me to make a big neck wrench, in Iowa, to say what was terrible about Barack Obama in Iowa when there wasn't anything terrible about Barack Obama in Iowa, would have been to put the conventions, the contrarian impulses of our business ahead of my actual sense of what the truth was. And so you want me to prove I'm not in the tank, Mickey. You want me to say something that I don't believe, or to go for the narcissism of small differences. Why should I?
John, you were wrong on 3 specific occasions because you were in the tank. You were wrong about Hillary and then at New Hampshire debate. You were wrong about the race speech.
I didn't write that.
You were wrong about telling Hillary to drop out before Ohio and Texas.
That was my comment to you at the debate.
Wrong because you were in the tank.
I wasn't wrong about having a dropout after in Indiana. She would be majority leader. After. She clearly didn't have a path to the nomination. She would be majority leader of the Senate if she had gone out classy instead of going out ugly. That was historically.
She's going to go out classy. She's going to go out classy, having won a few that she hadn't won before.
Maybe. We'll see. She has a second chance to go out classy. We'll see what she does in the next couple of weeks. I'm not holding my breath. But maybe she will. Maybe she'll surprise us and go out classy. We'll see. But she missed an opportunity to do it in an electrifying fashion. That's because all that she believes in is her own abilities as a survivor, her own grit. I didn't expect her to drop out, so you can't say I was wrong. I didn't predict that she was going to drop out. I was making I knew she wouldn't drop out. I was making an argument that it was in her interest historically to do so. That she would have been seen as a generous person. She would have defied all the expectations that the Clintons never quit. They never, ever, ever quit, even when they're being selfish. And she would have looked like a bigger person. She chose not to do that, to embarrass herself with these lame things she's done in the last few weeks. It's unfortunate. And I think that historians won't be kind to her over that. And she should have taken my advice, although I knew she wouldn't.
You were part of the pro-Obama pack trying to stampede her out of the race.
No, she was out. She was
finished.
That's
what it looked like to me.
She was mathematically finished. She only won one state, Arkansas, with 60% of the vote. she would have had, as I showed with the slate delegate calculator, she would have had to win every state 60-40 to win. It was never going to happen.
Well,
and
right,
people,
but I think she did herself a favor by staying in and winning the few states she's done, and now she can go out classy.
She did with her. She did with her core of, devoted supporters. Sure, they wanted her to stay in, and so the intensity of their support for her, she did herself a favor with them. I wasn't talking about them. They already like Hillary. I was talking about history, her legacy, her stature in the Democratic Party as a whole. Obviously, her supporters like the fact that she stayed in, but and I think it was actually, in retrospect, it was good for the party because it created intensity, more voter registration. So I don't think that it was bad for the Democratic Party that she stayed in. I'm not a hand-wringer about all the damage they've done to each other. I'm not a hand-wringer about negative campaigning. It's fine. It's been going on since the election of 1800. I was talking about her own legacy, her own ability to defy expectations. Her winning a couple primaries, by pandering, by pretending that she's, likes to knock back shots and all this phony Annie Oakley stuff. Fine, that might work with her supporters, but in terms of her overall historical reputation, it gives people a couple more chapters to show she's a phony.
This is a question that maybe you can answer.
Yeah.
Do fundraisers put pressure on her to drop out or to stay in? Somebody said that the fundraisers actually put pressure on her to stay in. They say, we've given you all this money and now you're dropping out. We gave you this money to fight.
The Hill raisers, her very tight coterie of Hill raisers, her big funders, they are totally devoted to her. Of course they wanted her to stay in. But just to finish, because I think we should end this, but on the money point, the other reason why she is toast, and she's been toast for weeks, is a metric that never gets used. And, I tried to write about it. Nobody cared. 1.5 million. The donor base that Obama has is 1.5 million donors, a huge percentage of them under $200. That means they don't have to report the contribution to the FEC, which in turn means that all of those donors are proprietary. Hundreds of thousands of donors. If Obama's the nominee, he says to the mayor of Fort Wayne, who was making this point to me again a few days ago, he wants to get reelected. He supports Obama. Obama's at the top of the ticket. He can get some of the Indiana donors and go to them. They're a renewable resource and get money for his campaign, for the down ballot. The super delegates are often local elected officials. It's all about the Benjamins for them because they want to get reelected. The only one who can get them the money is Obama because he's got the renewable resource, the 1.5 million donors that they can use and that are not available, and that he won't sell them the donor list. It's done.
That's an interesting point. You should write that point immediately.
Well, I wrote it. I basically wrote it, but not that sharply, a couple weeks ago. But you're right. I should write it as I just said it. You're right.
You have to be obsessive as a blogger. You have to hit things
You're right. I'm not
again.
A blogger. I'm not. I don't have enough ideas to be a blogger.
But you publish on the web. Newsweek publishes on the web. That's sort of almost blogging.
Yeah, I do a couple web columns a week, but that's not a blog.
Okay. Okay. Well, I don't want to keep you from going and publishing this. Feel free to beat up on me anytime.
Feel free to beat up on me anytime. I know that you haven't hesitated in the past, so that's this conversation, as I'm sure you know, but we should tell viewers, is in that spirit. This is kind of the way we talk to each other in private, so it's just a chance for some of you to get that before you wonder maybe about the tone of this, which has happened to me before when I've done blogger heads. Consider yourselves fly on the wall for an argument that Mickey and I have been having since 1983.
That's the idea. I think they got that impression.
Okay.
I hope they did. Anyway, let's do it again.
Okay, great talking to you. Bye.
See you, John. Good luck.
You too.
Okay, bye.